This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Rabbi Sai, we have a very interesting episode towards the end of the Parsha. We have two men. Vayisharu shnei anoshim hamachane. We have two men who remain in the camp. Shem ho'echad, Eldad. The name of the first guy is Eldad. V'shem hasheni, Medad. V'atanach aleim haruach. The Spirit rested on them. Vehema bakesuvim. And they are in the Chronicles. V'lo yatsu ha'oyela. They did not go out to the tent. Vayisnabu b'machane. They prophesied in the camp. Vayoratz hanar. The lad ran. Vayagid l'Moshe. And he spoke to Moshe. Vayoymar. And he said, Eldad u'Medad misnabim b'machane. Eldad and Medad are prophesying. Vayan Yehoshua ben Nun, Mesharis Moshe, Mibechura Vayoymar. Now Yehoshua ben Nun spoke up. Adoni Moshe Kiloim. Wipe them out, destroy them, lock them up. Vayomer Loi Moshe. Moshe said to him, Hamakanei Ali, are you jealous for me? Umi tein kol am Hashem neviim. If only God would allow all Jews to be prophets, Ki yitein Hashem asrucha aleim, by placing His Spirit on them. So the first thing we have to know, Rabbi Isai, is who in the world are Eldad and Medad? Who are they? What was wrong with prophesying? What do they prophesize? After all, we know that a Navi who gets Nevuah and he doesn't say it, HaKovish Nevuah, is Chayav Misa. And this Nar, the Rishonim say, was Gershon. And why does Yeshua ben Nun want to lock him up? Either the Chayav Misa or the not Chayav Misa. How does Moshe Rabbeinu have a right to be Moichel? The Chayav Misa, someone's Mechalo Shabbos. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moichel Zayin. What's going on? Who are these people?
Why are they Chayav Misa?
Who's Eldad? Who is this guy? Who is this person? Well, the closest we have to Eldad is in Parshas Maseh. We have the one who was Yoresh Eretz Yisrael to his Mata Lemata Ibn Yamin Elidad ben Kislain. The closest name we have to Eldad in the whole Chumash is Elidad. So you say, okay, Rabbi, it's close but no cigar. Eldad is not Elidad. Yeah, but it's pretty good, no?
Close.
And in fact, if you look in the Bamidbar Rabbah, you look in the Medrash, Eldad u'Medad. The Medrash, in fact, says, who? Elidad ben Kislain. That Eldad was Elidad. And who's Medad? Kemuel ben Shiftan. Who's Kemuel ben Shiftan? Well, looking back in Maseh, the Nasi of Sheva ben Yamin was Elidad ben Kislain. The Nasi of Bnei Dan is Buki ben Yagli. The Nasi of Yos ben Yosef, Chania ben Ephod. Lamate b'nei Ephraim Nasi Kemuel ben Shiftan. So very interesting, according to the Medrash. Eldad is Elidad, and Medad is Kemuel. Says about Turim, yeah, but Eldad is not Elidad. One is Eldad, and one has an extra yud. Well, it says about Turim, Elidad ben Kislain. Who Eldad? Where did he get the yud from? V'haisif lo yud. He was added a yud al shem hanavua, because he prophesied. And there are 10 types of nevuah. There are 10 lashonis of nevuah. What are they? Shenikres b'yud lashonis. Chazayin, hatafa, dibur, amira, tzivoy, masa, mashal, melitza, chida, nevuah. So the Baal Turim is explaining why he became known as Elidad, because he prophesied. However, the Rishonim are not happy with this explanation of Eldad and Medad. The Dasakena Mibali HaTosfos. Who's Eldad? Achi Moshe Hayu. He was Moshe's brother. Yeah, you heard that. You heard it.
Aaron?
No, not Aaron.
Could not be Aaron.
Eldad. Eldad was Moshe's brother. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you missed that day in yeshiva.
I missed that day.
You missed that day. When the Rebbe said Moshe had a brother Aaron, maybe you were absent. The next day he said he had another brother, Eldad, and Medad. He said, what? I just because I missed one day, I would have heard it somewhere along the line. Listen to this. Says the Tosfos. Ki kishenitna Torah, when the Torah was given, V'nesru ala arayos, and they became prohibited to marry relatives. Everyone separated from their wives, because almost everybody was married to a relative. Who wouldn't marry their aunt? In fact, according to the Torah, it's a mitzvah to marry your niece. It's a mitzvah. The best shidduch, the Gemara says, be marry your niece. So people married their aunts. And everyone had to get divorced at Matan Torah. Everyone was, at Matan Torah, big simcha, everyone had to get divorced. Pershu kulam. Everyone had to separate from the wife. Shenemar, Vayishma Moshe esa'am boichel l'mishpachoysav. Moshe heard the people crying, v'darshinan, the Gemara darshans, al iskei mishpachoysav, regarding the families. People had to break up from their wives. Including the Gadol Hadar Amram, who was married to his aunt, Yocheved. So Amram told Yocheved, it's been nice knowing you. You know, they had their 50th anniversary, and then they said their goodbyes, and that's it. V'gam Amram Abi Moshe pirish me Yocheved, shoysa ishtay.
He was a wife for Hasina.
Who?
Amram was a wife.
Yeah. V'nasa isha acheres. He got married to another wife. And guess who they had? Eldad and Medad. V'hoyled mimena Eldad and Medad. What does Eldad mean? Eldad. Eldad. Instead of an uncle. In other words, my father used to be married to his aunt, but now he switched and he had Eldad. That's me. What? Aldoid, not the uncle. Medad, Midod. Who's the uncle? In other words, Chiluf died in exchange of the uncle. Says Tosis, Matzasi Kundras me Rab Amram. I found a document from Rab Amram, Shehuva me Rab Hillel, who brought the name of Hillel, Shayim Eretz Yisrael. So now Rabbi Amram is reporting what he heard from Rabbi Hillel. Ani Hillel, I am Hillel. Ra'isi kever Eldad u'Medad. I saw the grave of Eldad and Medad. Now, nowadays it's not one of the big tourist attractions. It's not the Rajbi's kever and Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Meir Balanes, and the Ramchal. Eldad and Medad is not one of the big spots. But Hillel says, I saw it. Vayakasav aleim Eldad u'Medad achi Aaron min ha'av v'loy min ha'em. The half brother of Aaron. And then, so that's another noob shot. The Moshe Rabbeinu had a half brother that maybe we didn't know about, and they were the ones prophesying. Now, Rabbi Sai.
Sure that they were perished.
What?
Is that for sure that they left their wives?
They didn't leave their wives. Amram left his wife.
Or just Amram?
And the rest of Klal Yisrael.
That's for sure?
That's what he says. It's a Gemara. Yeah. But now you want to know, does everyone agree to that? It's not so pashut. Some say there's a Meshech Chachma who says that after Matan Torah they could stay with their wives. Why? The Meshech Chachma says like this: Hashem said, "Ve'ata pay amaydi madi, you stay with me, but everybody else go back to your tents, including those married to relatives." Why? Because Gershin is gayer kekatan shenoy ladam. Right? And the Meshech Chachma says, from here we see Gershin Eskai Katan Shenodami, and in fact they did not separate from their wives, and that's the opinion of the Meshech Chachma. Rav Sternbuch in the Mayadim Izmanim says the Meshech Chachma obviously forgot this Dasakanim. Can't argue on Tosfos. Tosfos says they were all Pirish, but that's a different sugya. We once, I don't know if we did it over here. If you want to know more about it, you could go to a shiur. It's called Solving the Lifelong Mystery of the Chassam Sofer, Shavuos time from last year. Okay, but this is the opinion of the Tosfos. Then Tosfos brings down the Medrash that who is Eldad? Elidad ben Kislein. Who is Medad? Kemuel ben Shiftan. But then Tosfos says at the end, V'temoli Heich efshar loymar shahayu achei Moshe. According to the Medrash, that this refers to Eldad and Kemuel. They couldn't have been brothers of Moshe because Eldad was from Shevet Binyamin. Kemuel was from Shevet Ephraim. So says Tosfos, you have to say demand is leha, less leha. They don't fit together. These are two distinct pshatim. One pshat is they were Elidad ben Kislein and they were Kemuel ben Shiftan, and they were not Moshe's brothers. And in that case, the person who saw their grave either saw someone else's grave or misread it, or the person who wrote the inscription made a mistake. It happens. But the other pshat is, these were the brothers of Moshe. And by the way, the Rosh says the same pshat as Tosfos. They were the brothers of Moshe from the father. And he reports the same tradition from Rav Amram in the name of Rav Hillel. Then how could you say like the Medrash that they were Eldad ben Kislan and Kemuel ben Shiftan? He also concludes, Man de isleha lesleha.
At what point in time were they not allowed to intermarry between the Shvat?
Right away.
Huh?
Right away.
Moshe couldn't, wasn't that after the no soft time?
It's not going to help you because even if they intermarried, but you can't be a nasi of the shevet if you don't come from that shevet.
Amram married somebody else. So he could have married somebody.
Yeah, but then they would be from Amram shevet, Levi. They couldn't have been, right?
Moshe couldn't ask him because he was a Korah.
To what?
So if you want to say,
oh, Moshe couldn't paskin.
Therefore, it solves the other question about Yeshua.
Yeah, but
Before his
then Moshe Rabbeinu should say, I can't paskin. He says, why are you jealous? Okay. Now, by the way, there's a very interesting sefer. I hear. Toldos Yitzchak. Toldos Yitzchak was written by Rabbi Yitzchak Karo. Mr. Karo, you like that name?
Yes.
Okay, good.
It's on a roll.
Who's Rabbi Yitzchak Karo? Rabbi Yitzchak Karo is the grandfather of Maran Bet Yosef. He's the grandfather of the Shulchan Aruch. And he wrote a sefer Toldos Yitzchak, and he says, V'im Toimar mi heim elu. Who are these guys? Eldad and Medad. Kabbalah biyad haneviyim harishonim. The early prophets have a tradition. Eldad u'Medad achi Moshe min ha'av. The same thing the Rosh and the Tosfos says, but he says this is a tradition dating back to the times of the early Nevi'im. Comes the Holy Chidah in the Sefer Pnei David. Last week you thought we saw a lot of from the Chidah? Haha. This week we're going to see a lot of from the Chidah. The Chidah says in the Pnei David, Amram was the father of Moshe. He separated from his wife. They had Eldad and Medad. Eldad, El Midod. Medad, Medod. Chiluf Dov. Then he says like this. In other words, he is quoting a different version of Tosfos. No, actually, the same version that we have. The same thing that we have in the Das Kenim.
This is Nizra? Is that what that means?
This is what?
Is that what he's saying? This was Yad
Yeah, it looks similar.
Nun Zayin with an apostrophe.
Ksav Yad HaNizkar, yeah. So that's, yeah. So the Chidah is also quoting the same thing that we saw in the Tosfos Das Kenim. Now this explanation is a little bit troublesome. To say that Moshe and Aaron had brothers from their father, because if you look in Divrei Hayamim, it says Bnei Amram, Aaron, Moshe, Miriam. Why doesn't it say Eldad Medad? If they were in fact the sons of Amram, they should have been listed in Divrei Hayamim. Asks the Pardes Yosef.
Wow.
Rabbi said there's a third explanation who Eldad and Medad are, and that's from the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, which was not written by Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel, the Chidah says, but because the printers already had a Targum Yerushalmi and they had nothing else to name it, they called it Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. Yonasan ben Uziel wrote Targum on Nevi'im, but not on. But anyway, what does Targum Yonasan ben Uziel say? V'ishtoiru train guvrin b'mashvisa. 2 men remained in the camp. Shmei dechad Eldad, u'shmei detinyan Medad. B'noi de Elitzafan ben Parnach. They were the sons of Elitzafan. Who's Elitzafan? We'll see. Dileidas le Yocheved. Yocheved gave birth to them. Bras Levi, Bizman de Patron Amram Gavra. When Amram got rid of Yocheved. Now, when did Amram get rid of Yocheved? A first time. So he divorced her 2 times. He divorced her. So the first time he divorced her, Paro made a decree, Kol habein hayilad hayorat tashlichu. So Amram said, what's the point of having children? He divorced Yocheved, everyone divorced their wife. Now the Gemara says, something contrary to what we think. At that point in time, Moshe had already been conceived. 3 months earlier. We tend to think that no, when he took her back, then they conceived Moshe, and then he was born after 6 months. No. The Gemara said he had already been conceived 3 months earlier. And then he takes her back. At that time he took her back, she was already pregnant with Moshe Rabbeinu. Yocheved is a smart lady. He's divorcing me, I'll marry someone else. No problem. Who does she marry? Elitzafan ben Parnach.
First time home? The second time?
The first time. The first time he divorces her, she remarries. Who? Elitzafan ben Parnach. Who's that? Look back at number 2. Ulamate v'nei Zavulon Nasi. Who's the Nasi of Zavulon? Elitzafan ben Parnach. Says Targum Hassan Aziel that when Amram divorced Yocheved the first time, she said, no problem, I got to continue on with my life. She marries Elitzafan, and they have 2 children, Eldad and Medad. He takes her back 3 months later. She was already conceived with Moshe. Now, how she could have had Eldad and Medad when Moshe Rabbeinu was already in her stomach,
We don't have that question.
we're going to get to that.
Oh.
Okay? But according to the Gemara, Moshe was conceived 3 months earlier. She, in the meantime, marries who? Elitzam ben Parnach. They give birth in 3 months to Eldad and Medad. He takes her back, and Moshe is born. Now then, how could he take her back? That's Machzor Grushasai. You're not to remarry your wife if she marries someone in the interim. So that's also we have to deal with. And there's only one person who could deal with that question. Okay? But that's the story according to Targum Hassan Aziel. So to me it's very interesting. Who's Eldad and Medad? Either when Amram got remarried after he divorced her the second time, he married a woman and they had Eldad ben Kislein or Buki ben Yagli. Or when Amram divorced her the first time, she married the Nasi of Bnei Zavulon, Elitzavon ben Parnach. Okay, fine. Okay, so these are 3 pshatim in who Eldad and Medad. Either, number 1, Eldad ben Kislein, Elitzavon ben Parnach. Or Kemuel ben Shiftan, Nasiim. Or they're the sons of Amram from different wives. Or the sons of Yocheved from a different husband. Now let's go for a moment. What did they prophesy? And we'll come back. What did they say? Says Rashi, Kilaim, destroy them. How do you destroy a rabbi? You give him a big stellar. Right? Everybody knows. How do you destroy her? Kilaim, Hitil aleim tzarchet tzibur, give them a big tzibur. Ve'im kalamei aleim, and then they're going to disappear on their own. Why? Because you can't learn a word, right? So give them the tzarchet tzibur. Davar acher, teneim el beis hakela, lock them up. Lefi shahayu misnaveim, Moshe meis, Moshe is going to die. Yeshua machnes es Yisrael haaretz, and Yeshua is going to bring them in. Now this is what? This is the second year, right? And that could be pretty discouraging if Klal Yisrael hears prophecy, Moshe is going to die and Yeshua is going to bring them in. So Yeshua said, lock them up. Says the Baal HaTurim, misnaveim. What's misnaveim? Kari be meis neviam. Misnaveim is a compound word. Meis neviam. The neviam is going to die. Shahayu aimrim Moshe meis, Yeshua machnes Yisrael la'aretz.
So, what they prophesied was the truth. I mean, it wasn't a shekel.
Oh, okay, good question. So what's wrong with what they said? Yaakov wants to know.
He said that it would be very disconcerting.
Yeah, but if you hear prophecy, you got to say it. And what's wrong? They're not Nevi'ei Sheker. By the way, misnavim is a compound word. Moshe tanuach nafshoy began Eden, began Elokim, Yeshua machnes. Misnavim is Rashi Tevas. Moshe is going to, his soul will rest in the garden of God, and Yeshua will bring him in. Rabbi, I want to tell you one of the most amazing things you'll ever hear. You ready? Listen to this. Why is Yeshua saying Misnavim b'machane? They're prophesying in the camp. Who cares where they're prophesying? Misnavim b'machane, b'gan, b'oyel moyed, b'machane. What's b'machane? If you say b'rabim, what's b'machane? When Moshe Rabbeinu was born, he called Moshe. Why? V'atoimer ki min hamayim mishisihu. There are two extra words in this pasuk. Nun hey. It should say ki mi mayim mishisihu. It should say ki mi mayim mishisihu. From the water. What's min hamayim? There's an extra nun and an extra hey. You got that?
Doesn't hey means the?
From the water. What's so special about that water? Ki, from water, he was drawn forth. Comes the Rebbe of Heschel. The Rebbe of Heschel was the Rebbe of the Shach. He was the successor of the Megal HaMukos in Krakow. When the Megal HaMukos was very ill, he said, let's make like a Shelas Shamayim, who should be the next Rebbe of Krakow. So they showed him the following pasuk. Ki hinehu oimed sham al hatzur. The Rosh Tevos oimed sham al hatzur. He says Heschel. Al hatzur is the gematria Krakow. So Rav Heschel needs to be the next rabbi of Krakow. The Chidah brings down in the Shem Agdolim. Yeah? So the Rebbe of Heschel says, you know why it doesn't say mi mayim mishisiu? Because mi mayim, mem mem yud mem, stands for Moshe Meis Yehoshua Machnes. Mi mayim, Moshe Meis Yehoshua Machnes. It's not nice to say that as soon as he's born. So it sticks in an extra nun hey. Comes Yeshua ben Nun many years later, 82 years later, and he says, Misnavim bi machane. Memches means mach, erasing. Nun hey. B'machane! You know what they're doing? They're being mach, they're erasing nun hey. The nun hey. It should say, ki min hamayim mishisiyu. And what they want to erase is the nun hey and make it mi mayim. And if it says mi mayim, it's Moshe Meis Yeshua Machnes. That's the remez that Yeshua was telling Moshe. Moshe, guess what they're saying now? They're removing the nun hey. And if you remove the nun hey, you're left with mi mayim. And mi mayim is Moshe Meis Yeshua Machnes. Says the Rebbe of Heschel. Yeah, you got that? In other words, Eldad Umedad Misnavim Be Mach, they're erasing nun hey of the pasuk Ki min hamayim mishisiyu. If you erase the nun hey, you're left with mi mayim Moshe Meis Yeshua Machnes. Okay, Rabbi say a little lumdus before we get to the mystical part, okay? Now we can hear the Kasha, Reb Chaim Brisker. Comes the Av Bezdin of Brisk, Reb Simcha Zelig Rieger, and he once asked Reb Chaim Brisker, Mimonavshach, are Eldad and Medad Nevi'ei Emes or Nevi'ei Sheker? If they're Nevi'ei Emes, they're chayiv to speak, because we know that a Navi who's Kovesh Nevuasa, the Rambam Paskins, is chayiv Misa, Bidei Shamayim. So why does Yoshua want to kill them? You can't kill a Navi who speaks Nevuah. If he would withhold his Nevuah, he'd be chayiv Misa, Bidei Shamayim. Elamai, they're Nevi'ei Sheker. How do you kill a Navi Sheker? With Chenek. So why does Yeshua just want to lock him up? They need to get... In other words, what's the problem with Eldad and Medad? Are they true Nevi'im or are they false Nevi'im? If they're true Nevi'im, they got to talk. And if they're false Nevi'im, then you got to give them Chenek. What's Adoni Moshe Kilaim? Says Reb Chaim Brisker, you pass me a Chumash. Says Reb Chaim Brisker, a nice Lom de Shipshan. Thank you very much. In Perek Yod Aleph Pasuk Tez Zayin, Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, Esfali Shivamish, gather 70 men, Miziknei Yisrael, Asher Yadata Ki Heim Ziknei Ha'am V'Shoitra, V'lakachta oisam el Oyel Moyed. Take them to the Oyel Moyed. V'hisyatz v'shamimach. Let them stand there. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu said, my job is too hard. Hashem said, I'll give you assistance. Where do they need to prophecy? In the Oyel Moyed. So Eldad and Medad were giving nevuah. What was the nevuah? Mimayim, Moshe Meis, Yeshua Machnes. And they needed to say the nevuah, because the navi that's kavish nevuah is chayiv misa. But there was an added detail of the nevuah, and that is the location of the nevuah. And that is they need to prophecy in the Oyel Moyed. That's why Yeshua ben Nun comes running in. Eldad u'Medad misnavim. B'machaneh. They're in the wrong place. So
who always had to be given in
there was a detail, one of the halachas given to these Nevi'im is that you need to speak the Nevuah in the Oyel Moyed. Now, they were violating it, they were doing it in the Machane. So Yeshua ben Nun comes and says like this. They're not Nevi'ei Sheker because Hashem told them Nevuah and they have to say it. So we're not going to give them Chenek to be a Navi Sheker, but they're violating a detail of Nevuah, and therefore if you're violating a detail of Nevuah, the Chayiv Misa. To which Moshe Rabbeinu responds, why did God give them that detail? It's only for my honor, because he doesn't want people to hear that I'm going to die. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm Moichel. It's only a matter of my covet now. This was an added halacha. Avada, they have to say the nevuah, because the Navi that's kosher nevuah says chayev misa b'dei shamayim. Fine. Now you're saying they're violating a detail of nevuah? That was only for my benefit. And Navi, or excuse me, Harav shemachal al kevoidoi machal.
So we don't consider him a melech.
Oh, good kasha. They ask, but Moshe Rabbeinu was also a melech.
Yeah. Oh.
So how could he be meichel on his covet? So this might be a different kind of malchus. This might be a different kind of malchus. So let's see this inside. Nene moran hagrach v'yamar nevuah zu nemar lahem b'toisus hayra. This nevuah was given to them in an added detail that they have to say in the Oyel Moyed, like it says v'lakachta oisam al Oyel Moyed, and they didn't do that. V'lo yatzu oyel v'yisnabu b'machaneh. Now says Reb Chaim, if going out to the Oyel Moyed was a Tanai in the Nevuah, that they could only speak the Nevuah if they do in the Oyel Moyed, then by violating the Tanai, then they're violating the entire Nevuah, then they would taka the Chayav Misa. But it wasn't a Tanai, it was just an added halacha. Hokach Misa loy neschayv v'nach Chayav Misa, because they're a Nevi'ei MS, and they're chayav to say it, but they're violating a detail, and therefore Yeshua ben Nun comes running to Moshe, and he says, you need to lock them up for violating the halacha. To which Moshe responded, Hamakane ateli. The whole reason for the Tanai of giving in the Oyel Moyed is only for my honor. I'm Moichel on my honor. By the way, I think the Paneach Raza, we've quoted many times, Paneach Raza was written by one of the, I think the Balei Tosfos, by Rabbeinu Yitzchak. By the way, the gematria of Paneach is 208, the gematria of Raza is 208, and the gematria of Yitzchak is 208. That's why he called it Paneach Raza. The Chida says that V'kasha lama hikvid Yeshua, why was Yeshua so bothered? Presumably he's asking, they're Nevi'im. The answer is, all the Nevi'im had a prophecy in the Oyel Moyed. And they asked permission from Moshe. And these guys didn't ask for permission from Moshe, and they prophesied outside the Oyel Moyed. To which Moshe responded, what's an afkamina, as long as they're making my job easier. Okay? Rabbi Say, fasten your seatbelts. There happens to be a Gemara in Chagiga, and if you don't remember this Gemara, don't feel bad. It's on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Let me read to you a Gemara in Chagiga. We learned it a few months ago. Hanhu Trei Ilmi. There were two mute people. Dahava B'Shevavusei the Rebbe, who were in the neighborhood of Rebbe. B'nei Barte the Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, either the children of the daughter of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, Va'amri Lan, some say B'nei Achte the Rabbi Yochanan, the son of the sister of Rabbi Yochanan. They were mute. If you're mute, you can't talk. The Cholaim has to have an Ayel Rebbe l'Beit Midrash, but whenever Rebbe would come to the Beis Medrash, Havu Aili, they would come in, the Yasi Kamayo, and they would sit in front of Rebbe. Umanai Dibrei Shal, they would nod their heads. Everything Rebbe said, they would nod their heads. Umarachshim Vasayu, they would enunciate with their lips. In other words, they seem to know what's going on. So Rebbe felt bad. Here, they're so smart. They chap the Shiur. They're so into it. Uboy Rebbe rachami aleyu. Rebbe davened for them. Ve'itzu. And they were healed. The ishtakach, and it came out to have a gemiri hilchasa. They found they were well versed in all shas, v'sifra, taras kainim, v'sifri, mishnatar, v'kula hashas. Once upon a time, there were two mute people, and it turned out they were cured and they knew kol hatarku. Who were these two mute people? Says the Chida in his commentary on Shas, Pesach Einayim. In the name of Sefer Gilgulei HaNeshamas. Rabbi said, who wrote Sefer Gilgulei HaNeshamas? We had it on the sheet Wednesday. Ramanacham Azariah, the Ramami Pano. And the Ramami Pano had a tradition from Rabbi Yisrael Saruk, who I think was a student of the Arizal. You know who these two mute guys were? Eldad and Medad. They were the Gilgul of Eldad and Medad. Dahani ilmi hayu Gilgul Eldad and Medad. Look over there. Says the Chida, let me tell you a cute little remez. The word ilmi is Rashi Tevais Eldad mi Medad. Ilmi Eldad Medad. Says the Chida, for more on this story, you need to look in my Sefer Pnei David. What's Pnei David? Pnei David is one of the Chida's Svarim on Chumash. So, Mr. Simanowitz, so a number of years ago when you got me the Svarim of the Chida, Baruch Hashem, it included not only the Pesach Einayim, but it included the Pnei David. Now, the Pardes Yosef said he looked in the Pnei David, and the Chida doesn't talk about it. But if you look carefully, the Chida does talk about it in the Pnei David. So the Pardes Yosef wasn't able to find it. He writes, Ayin Sham b'Pesach Einayim, Mashgaz Sifroi Pnei David, u'Pnei David lo diber klal be'inyan zeh. But it's not true. If you look in the Pnei David, he does talk about it. Moshe Makane Atali Umi Yitain. You ready for this? Says the Pnei David. Hamek Moshe ends in a hey. Hamakane ends in an aleph. Ata ends in a hey. Li ends in a yud. Umi ends in a yud. Yitain ends in a nud. Gematria 81. Ilmi 81. You got that? Moshe Rabbeinu says to Yeshua, Moshe, take a look back at the psukim. Vayomer loy Moshe makana atali umi yitain soifei tevos hey aleph hey yud nun begamatria 81 ilmi the mute. Why? Ki Eldad Medad have a trey ilmi debai Rebbe Rachmei Alayim. And Rashi Tevos Hashem Es Ruchai. What's Hashem Es Ruchai? Hashem begins with a yud. Es begins in an aleph. Ruchai begins in a resh. 211. Gematria Rebbe who cured the two ilmei. Hashem Es Ruchai. Mi yitain Hashem Es Ruchai yud aleph resh Gematria Rebbe. With the koilal, it's 211. Rebbe is 212. So if you think this is all the Chida says about it, no, Chida has more to say about this. The Chida in the Nachal Kidumim, Beha'aloscha, he adds, Shem ha'echad Eldad v'shem ha'sheni Medad. The Ramah, in the name of Rabbi Yisrael Saruk, says that Eldad and Medad were nizgalgal as two ilmim. Says the Chida, there's a perfect realness. Take the first two letters of Eldad, Aleph Lamed. Take the first two letters of Medad, Mem Yud. What does that spell? Ilmi. Hashem Es Ruchai Rashi Tevos Gematria Rebbe. Oy Rabbi Say, you're going to have a lot of simcha right now. You're going to have so much simcha, don't bump your head on the ceiling. Says the Chida, Adoni Moshe Kilaim. What's Kilaim? Keilaim. Yeshua ben Nun says, Adoni Moshe Kilaim, and that was Niskayim. The letters Kilaim could spell out Keilaim, like the mute. But Rabbi say, you can never, in life, whenever you see things in Svarim, you must look it up in the original source. So even though the Chida says he saw it in the Sefer Gugulei Neshamas, you got to look up the Sefer Gugulei Neshamas. Luckily, I happen to have the Sefer Gugulei Neshamas of the Ramami Pano, and the Ramami Pano adds a number of amazing details to the story. Eldad Medad. Now, first, now of the three explanations we said there are three possibilities. Either they were the son of Amram when he divorced Yocheved the second time, or they were the Nesiim, Eldad ben Kislein and Kemuel ben Shiftan, or they are the sons of Yocheved, like the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says. So who does the Ramami Pano side like? Look at number 22. Eldad Medad. Amru al pasuk vayisharu shnei anoshim b'machane Targum Yonasan v'yishtayru train guvrin b'mashvisa. Two men remained in the camp. Shemei dechad Eldad v'shmei detinyan Medad b'noi del Yitzavan ben Parnach v'yiledas le Yocheved bras Levi when Amram got rid of her. If Amram the chassid, one of the four people who never sinned, how could Amram take back Yocheved after Yocheved married who? Elitzafan ben Parnach.
Is that the same problem?
What?
To that. He married his aunt, so we see that they...
That was mutter then.
Wait. Just wait. Okay.
Another big problem is Oid Kasha. At the time he divorced her, Yocheved was already expecting. It's 3 months when Amram took her back. How in the interim did she give birth to Eldad and Medad? What happened? She said, Moshe, you hang out here a little bit longer. In the meantime, I'm going to live with Elitzam ben Parnach, and I'm going to produce 2 kids in 3 months. You're going to stick around here, and then you'll come out 6 months after. What's going on? So says the Ramami Pano. V'gam b'pera kama de Chagiga. The first parak of Chagiga. Hanu trei ilmi dehava b'shavavusei de Rebbe, the 2 mute who were in the neighborhood of Rebbe. B'nei Barti de Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. V'shtakach dehava gemiri. Let me tell you the secret. This side ha'inyan, the secret is like this. Why did these 2 poor guys, Eldad and Medad, have to come back as ilmim, as mute people? V'soid ha'inyan elu trei achen Eldad u'Medad v'leidasan hoisa az bedima minasuin hanisgar. They came from the tears of that marriage. V'heim b'soid dimas ha'ashukim. They were the tears of the oppressed. Now what does that mean? That means the following. That when Amram divorced Yocheved, he didn't divorce her wholeheartedly. He was forced into it because of Paro's decree. So since he didn't really divorce her properly, Memela, when Elitzafan married her, it didn't produce children who were at full capacity. So even though they were born the first time at full capacity, but when they came back as a Gilgal, they came back as Ilma. Why? Because me'achar de get lo haya b'leiv shalem al keinoil du ilmim. And there's another reason why they were ilmim. You know why? Gam l'siba achar sayomim ki pershu neviyasan shaloi bershos. Says Ramami Pano, they had no right to say the nevuah. There's a rule that a kovesh nevuasa is chayav misa. That's only if Hashem says to the Navi, Lamar, to say it to others. But if God doesn't tell the Navi to speak it over to others, they know how to say it. Do like Siv Lamar. Ki ein roi la'imram la'acherim kishein oimar Lamar. Right? So this is a new answer to Reb Chaim Brisker's kasha. Reb Chaim Brisker wanted to know Mimanavshach. If they were true Nevi'im, they had to say it. And if they're not true Nevi'im, Chayiv Misa, the answer is they were true Nevi'im. But they shouldn't have said it. Because Hashem didn't tell them Lamar. And therefore, because they spoke inappropriately, when they came back to this world, what was their Einesh? They were ilmim. They were mute. God showed them nevuah misnavim, which stands for Moshe Tenuach Nafshoy began Elokim Yoshua Machnes. And they needed to hide their nevuah until they got permission. And that's why Yoshua was jealous for the Rebbe. This is a new answer to the question. They were true Nevi'im, but they weren't supposed to say it. And even though they were from that marriage, but because they revealed nevuah inappropriately, they had to come back to this world without the faculty of speech, if not for Rebbe, who was mispalo for them, and they were cured in order to learn Torah. And that's why their souls were so steeped in Torah, because who are they? They're none other than Eldad and Medad. Now, did Amram do an Avera by taking them back? No, because he never divorced Yocheved the first time. Machzer Grushas is only when you divorce someone. But Amram never divorced her wholeheartedly. It's called, he gave a moidah on the get. He divorced her, but he made it known he's only doing it because of the decree. Yocheved didn't do an Avera. Eli Tzafan didn't do an Avera. It was before the Torah was given. So how could Amram take her back? Listen to this. Amram. This idea, how Amram could take her back, it's like David who took Michal back after Michal lived with Paltiel. How could David take Michal back? Because David gave her a get. He gave him Maidah, that it's a bad get. And when Paltiel took her, it wasn't a marriage. So to Amram, he divorced Yocheved, but it was with the Maidah that he's only doing it because of the Gezerah of Parai. And therefore he was allowed to take her back. And therefore Amram didn't do an Avera, Eli Tzafan didn't do an Avera, Yocheved didn't do an Avera. And this is the amazing story of Eldad and Medad. So Rabbi say, who is Eldad and Medad? So we have, the Medrash says, Elidad ben Kislein, Kemuel ben Shiftan. The Zasakanim, the Rosh, the Taldas Yitzchak, the Chidah, they say it's none other than the sons of Amram after he divorced Yocheved, after Matan Torah. And then you have the opinion of the Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel and the Ramami Pano, that these were the sons of Yocheved after Amram divorced Yocheved the first time. And then the Ramami Pano reveals to us the tremendous secret that the two mute in the Gemara and Chagiga on Daf Gimel were none other than Eldad and Medad. Ilmi stands for El, Dad, Mi, Medad. Rashi Tevois of Hashem Esruchai, our Gematria Rebbe, who cured Eldad and Medad. Soifei Tevois of the Soifei Tevois says the Pnei David of the words of Moshe Umi Yitain Skalam Hashem is 81 Ilmi, and says the Chidah Adonai Moshe Kilaim. Kilaim is Keilaim, and this is another pshat. Who is Eldad and Medad? They later became the two Ilmim in the Gemara and Chagiga. And I wish you all a good Shabbat.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.